Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, The Truth About Selling. The Truth About Selling. And more importantly, why we need heroic salespeople. Why salespeople are heroes and why we need heroic salespeople. So let's begin. First, a comment. Why do we set aside time like this to improve? We follow the central idea in the book E-Myth, which talks about this important distinction. Most of the time we're working in the business. When we gather like this, we're working on the business to get better at what we do. This is a time to be thoughtful. Now, if you're ready for a quiet, tame seminar, forget about it. This is going to be an intense seminar with fireworks. So my advice to you is fasten your mental seatbelt and prepare yourself for a deep plunge into urgency-based selling. Hopefully, I'll bring you to a safe landing. Now, along the way of our journey today, perhaps we'll also succeed in working towards becoming a better trusted advisor. Now, why is this important? Because when we compete, when we're trying to win business, and the competitor is already a trusted advisor, it's like we're kicking the ball upfield, and they're just rolling the ball downfield. So what we need to do is level the playing field. And in today's webinar, we're going to talk about how do you do that, particularly when we're coming in on a transaction and they're already a trusted advisor. So what's our agenda? We're going to talk about how we align with the path of growth, how do we catalyze sales innovation and do or die, and ensure that we're going to get a second sales call if we have a prospect through the use of the inescapable idea. So what is this truth about selling? Why are we heroes? We're heroes because we have to beware this self-defeating perspective, which is that salespeople are slimy. This perspective is promulgated in works like the play Death of a Salesman, where we're introduced to Willie Loman as an anti-hero, a slimy loser. He cheats in life, he cheats on his wife, he commits suicide, and this is the kind of idea that's out there in our culture. When we face buyers, very often they're thinking of this kind of a salesperson. What's even worse, though, is sometimes we as salespeople internalize this idea, and then we're done before we start. And this is so unfortunate because salespeople are heroes. I use as my source material Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces. Campbell studied heroes' myths in hundreds of cultures over thousands of years to trace out the quest or path of the hero. So let's look quickly at a typical hero myth in the Middle Ages. Everything is good in a village, in a town, and then all of a sudden a fire-breathing dragon moves into the vicinity, starts killing cattle and then people. The mayor, the king, the queen, the vizier gathers all the townspeople into the center square. Let's zoom in. A promulgation is made. If somebody will go out and kill that dragon, they'll get half of the kingdom, of the mayor or the king or the queen, and get to marry their son or daughter if that's something you'd like to do. And as we look at all these people in the town square, we notice their heads are bowed. They're ashamed. They don't want to do it. And then one person says, I'll go, and they go off on this quest, and they meet friends, allies, and enemies on the road, and they gain strength. They get perhaps some magical weapons like the cloak of invisibility or the shield of invincibility. And finally, they're strong enough to face the dragon. They face the dragon, they vanquish it, cut off the head, bring it back, get their reward. And the central question that's raised in this book is, at what point of the story do they become a hero? At what point? Many people think it's when they come back and they get their reward. But what's true in culture after culture is that it's when that person raises their hand and goes forward into uncertainty. By the way, my book is inscribed or endorsed by George Lucas. You know what he did, don't you? He created Star Wars, and he said this book was a major inspiration for creating Star Wars. And think about Luke Skywalker, if you've seen, the canon. When did he become a hero? Is when he said, "I'll go off on this quest with old Ben Kenobi." But we don't face fire-breathing dragons today, do we? We face dragons of the mind. For us to succeed, we have to overcome these dragons of the mind. What are they? They include ignorance, bias, complacency, laziness. Haven't you thought about salespersons, buyers sometimes? They're too lazy to live. And most importantly, we overcome the closed mindset. The buyer is closed in their mind. And that's what moves civilization forward, is overcoming the closed mind. Very often as salespeople, we're stuck until we reach this inflection point. We try, we call, we do all sorts of things, and we want to scream until we get to this inflection point when we break through in a relationship. And how do we do that? How do we do that? We take the prospect on a journey on the change curve. So when we reach out to a typical prospect, they'll say to us, "I'm good." That's the beginning of the adventure. Now, the material I'm about to present comes from a book called On Death and Dying. And the central idea is that all change involves grieving. So as we start to talk with a prospect, if they'll talk to us, they go into denial. "I don't need this. Why are you bothering me?" So we bring them evidence. And then we encounter the closed mindset. The prospect doesn't know what they don't know. Our job is to bring them along this curve from resistance to exploration, because then if we could open their mind to think about our offer, they could fall in love with it and they could buy from us. So the key here is going from resistance, closed mindset, to exploration, open mindset. Now, we have found that doing power of the wisdom in the room exercises is a great way to advance your sales culture in your company. When you get back to your team, you might just want to brainstorm this issue. How do you convince a prospect to take a journey on the change curve? Now, a core challenge in doing this for many of us is the difference between social selling and business selling. So many salespeople I've encountered are social sellers. They want to make friends. I use as my metaphor here Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And this is, why are they like this? It's because of that slimy Willy Loman image, the used car salesman who victimized people, who's in our culture. That's why they become social sellers. But they also need to be, and there's nothing wrong with that, it's nice to interact with people, but you also need business values. For business values, I use as my metaphor the Harvard Business Review article, March 2010, "In a Downturn, Provoke Your Customer." Now, it's not one or the other. In Built to Last, Collins and Porras would call that a tyranny of the or. But the problem is when we're only social sellers and not business sellers, we don't close new business. And that's what should be a red flag. So again, in Built to Last, they call this a tyranny of the or. It's not one or the other. We need both. How do we get the wherewithal, the stamina to overcome the resisting prospect? They're in a second best position represented here, and we see a way to bring them to an optimal situation. Let's look at it from the point of view of the two-mountain metaphor. The prospect standing on top of this mountain, and they're looking down, and they're really pleased with how far they've come. And because they're looking down, they don't notice there's a higher mountain of well-being nearby. So what drives this entire selling program, and what is at the core of it, is we could take the prospect to a higher level of well-being. This is the essence of persuasion. The prospect's looking down, and we get him to look up. What earns the right to access with a prospect and also gives us moral certainty so we feel clean inside is we know we can bring them to this higher mountain of well-being. How does this play out in reality? When we reach out to a prospect, at first they could ignore us, or maybe they're hostile. Often we need to pierce the veneer of I'm good. You know, the typical prospect will tell you I'm good, even if they're drowning and we're going to save them. They still tell you I'm good. Well, finally you might connect. Prospect says, I'm busy. Clock's running. But you see, the prospect doesn't know what the prospect doesn't know. That's what we call type 3 knowledge. Type 1 is what you know. Type 2 is what you know you don't know. Type 3 is what you don't realize you don't know. See, at the outset, the prospect doesn't know it's what we do. We move mountains for our prospects. And we need to get their attention in various different ways just so that we can present to them how we move mountains for them. Well, when he or she finally knows, they become our best bud, don't they, right? Now, this takes a do or die approach. So let me make another contrast for you, and it aligns with social versus business, and it's do or die versus best efforts. So when I was a teenager, mom and dad taught me if I just gave it my very best efforts, that would be fine. Well, I started 3 small businesses, and here's what I discovered. When I'm trying to close new accounts and I'm going up against entrenched competition, if I give it my best effort, I will fail 100% of the time. Best efforts is a loser's game. We need do or die. Now, how do you apply that today in your business? If you're in the kind of business where you can benefit from referrals, assume for the moment that you set an objective of getting 1 warm referral a month from a big fan. Let's say the month goes by and you don't have any. How many do you need in the second month? On a best efforts basis, you'll try for 1 again. On a do or die basis, you go for 2. That's the meaning of do or die. And going through this drama, this business development drama, this is our job. In order for us to succeed at it, we have to have very strong self-belief in ourselves and in our company. And we also have to care about the prospect who's in that suboptimal position. I believe we need to commit to a quest, a crusade, 5 parts to it. Obviously, on our own behalf, we're crusading. On behalf of our company, the company for whom we work. On behalf of the team. The team in operations and fulfillment, without us in sales, they don't have any work. So we have to crusade on their behalf. Of course, on behalf of the client. And the irony here is we're crusading on their behalf, and at the outset, they're resisting us. And finally, the higher cause. To me, the higher cause that should inspire every salesperson is we're making the world better, civilization better, by taking the prospect to a better place, by opening the closed mind. Now, if we show this compelling image, the higher mountain, we should expect to face skepticism, resistance. And so here's another place where the salesperson is a hero, is meeting the burden of proof criteria. So this comes from philosophy, and what it means is the burden of proof is on someone who says something is so. So if we say something is so, we need to prove our case, or we won't sway the skeptic. So that's these are 2 key areas where the hero is needed. 1, to show that vision of what's possible and to persist in the face of resistance. And then when we get the prospect's attention, to deal with skepticism. This is another good place for a power of the wisdom of the room exercise in your company. How do we meet the burden of proof challenge in business development? How do we convince the skeptic? It takes courage to assemble and use your wow toolbox. What's in your wow toolbox? How do you get wows from customers and prospects? Let's look at the contents of a wow toolbox for a client. This client happens to be an architectural firm. We've worked with them for, I guess, about 13 years now. What's in the wow toolbox? Well, this hard-hitting messaging with strong iconic metaphors, visual metaphors, powerful testimonial letters, examples of work we've done, hard-hitting diagnostic questions, which, by the way, if urgency-based selling might be interested to you, we're going to cover must-have questions to close the sale in our next webinar. And finally, risk mitigation techniques. All of these are in your WOW toolbox. This is another power of the wisdom in the room exercise. What's in your WOW toolbox? Now, here's a 4-step sequence for proving to the skeptic. We happen to be selling controller cards for turbines. We have powerful processes, including our ISO certification. Here's the table of contents of our quality book. So our powerful processes lead to strong statistics, measurables, and this is the science of our business. And all too often, salespeople don't bring this in to deal with the skeptic, because when we have strong processes, strong statistics, then we could offer a believable warranty, or if we don't do a warranty, a promise. And finally, this is validated by powerful customer testimonial letters. Cautionary note, some salespeople who are really strong, they exhibit toxic behavior. They're not team players, and they don't show gratitude for the rest of the team that makes their success possible. So we want to be good team players, don't we? In fact, when we show the buyer that we're a team player and that it takes a team, it actually reduces perceived risk on the buyer's part, because the buyer knows it takes a team. So we should sell the team because it makes us believable. What's a place for bold behavior and proof? One place is when the prospect says, I'm good. What do you say? This could shut down 80% of the opportunity that we face. And it's another great place for a power of the wisdom in the room exercise. How do you handle I'm good? I recommend a 20-second drill. You should challenge yourself and your team members. How do you come back to the prospect saying, I'm good? 20 seconds. So when the prospect says, I'm good, we could say, just good, not fantastic. Do you know all my clients require fantastic? Aren't you curious as to what fantastic looks like? Don't you want to invite me in? Or we could say, I'm surprised to hear you say that. I didn't know my competitor delivers these features or benefits that we do. Or you might say, we could typically revolutionize our customers' businesses. I don't know if I could do it for you, but I'm calling to set up an appointment to see if I could do it. So a good exercise for your team, another power of the wisdom in the room, is to list your central recurring objections and work out your responses. And a great way to start them again that takes courage is, I'm surprised to hear you say that. The inescapable idea. If you want that second call, if you want to close the sale, you want to show you have an inescapable idea. It begins with hitting the prospect's hot button issue. We treat that with bold vision, proving, and prospect validation. So after we make our presentation, we need the prospect to let us know we've got a wow. And that gets you to client urgency. So they're going to satisfy that urgency with somebody, but not necessarily with us. We want them to satisfy it with us. So we want to treat the urgency with proven, defendable position. Here I refer you to Blue Ocean strategy. We want to find an uncontested space, and that becomes the inescapable idea. Very often, the uncontested space is us as a trusted advisor, which is why we mentioned that at the beginning of the webinar. So to smoke out the hot button, you might say, here are some common challenges that customer faces with their current suppliers. Not responsive. By the way, what is our net promoter score if you know that? Quality problems, not innovative enough, not customer focused. Gee, I hope you don't have these problems. This could be a way to get the customer into a fact finder so you can determine where to emphasize your presentation and create wows. So we're almost at the end of today's webinar. Here are some takeaways for you to think about. Salespeople are heroes. The essential heroic act is opening the closed mind. Selling is a thinking person's profession. It usually takes bold behavior to open the closed mind. For instance, saying, "I'm surprised to hear you say that." It's important to drill on the "I'm good" objection. It probably shuts down 80% of opportunity. Well, we know Rome wasn't built in a day, so you all might want to think for a moment, what, if anything, did you take away from today's presentation? If you have any questions, you could write to me at andy@urgencybasedselling.net. So the final thing I'll share with you is our next free webinar is in a month, April 10th at 10:30 a.m. Questions you must ask to close the sale. So thanks for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Bye now.